Okay, welcome everyone. The agenda today we put together was to review our existing initiatives. There's 4 that we could touch base on if you have any questions, and then really turn our agenda to looking at the Denver rebate electrification program that was launched by Denver. And that was, I was going to look for the
It was April 22nd, Earth Day.
Yes, and then the period, there was a couple months, before it closed. And EBC, we met with the program managers the day before it launched when they presented to the contractors, gave some really great feedback from our forecast committee about 4 things that they thought would make modifications that would make it a more successful program and get more contractor uptake. And so what I wanted to do is see if you guys would like to touch base on the existing initiatives and take the rest of the meeting to, we could either watch the video that's been edited down to 24 minutes, or if you guys feel comfortable, if you haven't seen it, you'd want to watch it afterwards. But I'd like to get your feedback on the ideal program. And actually, I'm going to put my slide up for you and say, would you guys be up for talking about that? Because I think if we can frame up what we see would be modifications and improvements, and Denver said they're starting to look at what their analytics are, their results. And I got the impression that we probably could be very valuable in offering our lessons learned from the experience and what metrics maybe they should be looking at in their analytics on the results of the program. And both Lee and Jeff said that they were hoping to start releasing that in September. So we talked about working with our group to almost like survey, get the EBC members' feedback, especially from the manufacturer, distributor, and contractor perspective, and give them recommendations. And I think that we should take this, promote it to the contractors. And Jeff and Lee said they would come back and they would like to have a discussion with us about what we recommend and what our contractors experienced, so that they can work on their analytics. And then maybe we could actually design what we'd say the ideal program would be. Antitrust law, just remember that we don't share pricing or territory collusion or any of those types of things within our group. With our Good Green Jobs work that we're doing to build a pipeline for our contractors, we also have thank you to Matt, who's on the phone, and Pete, and also Scott from Vista. So that's Dyken and Jay Larson for taking on updating a full summary of all of the utility rebates and then the equipment requirements for all the utilities in the state. And that's about ready to launch. So we'll have that available and ready for all the contractors and all of our heat pump HVAC members. We also have the Heat Pump Acceleration 2030 forecasting group that has been meeting next week. And I think we're going to be rolling out what we're learning. And the EBC also, we created a partnership with RMI, used to be Rocky Mountain Institute, and they're bringing their data analytics team, their engineers, to help us with that forecast, so that we're going to feel pretty good about the viability of it and the resources and the base data that's put into it. And then as a reminder, we're going into rebate modification, creation, strategic issues, all the regulatory work that we partner with Excel on. Just a shout out that Excel has been fantastic. And Anne, you're one of them. And also the lighting division. We've been working informally with our action groups and meeting with the departments about where we see rebates going, how, we call them incentives and measures, but we call them rebates. It's the Demand Side Management Program is the formal name of the Public Utilities Commission. And the point is that I think we have a fantastic relationship with our groups and working on collaborating on where the market's going, where the rebates should be going, what is the market development necessary for Excel to hit their savings goals and for those rebates to be delivered and for usable by the contractors in the marketplace to help you improve your business and your bottom line. So those are 4 big projects that have been going on. And then we're going to step into the Denver electrification rebate program. We do have the video edited down to 24 minutes. So we'll send out the follow-up email to you guys so that you could actually watch that and see the exchange. And then we have minutes as well for the different discussion that took place. But I think many of you participated, or your contractors let you know what they're experiencing or expected from the rebates. So I think we can just jump in, but I'd like to organize it in 3 topics. 1, let's talk about the improvement and modifications that we recommend. And I will go through the 4 recommendations that the forecasting group came up with that we did share with Denver, and that you wanted to make sure we'll talk about those first. Then the recommendations in the data, they said they're going to start their data analytics to look at the results. And so if we could say, here are the things that we would look for in the program if we were a company evaluating how successful we're in launching it. So I think that would be valuable. And then kind of that ideal best practices, how would we recommend as an industry the ideal program that would be the most successful for the contractors and the homeowners in the marketplace? So a couple things. First piece that our group talked about, and we had 2 distributors there and 2 manufacturers and a retired commercial heat pump. I think it was on a distributor manufacturer side, wasn't he, Pete?
Yeah.
We're in that first meeting. So there was 6 of us. So if you look at the result here, the program was open from April 22nd to June 24th. They said they had 286 heat pump rebates that were processed. And there was still 1 small group that was still doing some rebates that was more like a pilot test group or something. What our forecasting group said is if they restructured the rebate levels and wanted to get 4 times the amount of rebates processed, so if you take that, we'll just say 3 times 4, so get 1,200 heat pump rebates into the marketplace. If you look at a furnace install, so an HVAC and a heat pump install. And so with the furnace, if you're replacing 1-to-1 furnace to the heat pump, they were saying instead of offering a $9,000 something rebate for the heat pump install, and if you looked at they were going to replace a gas install with the furnace, then the amount of work, the sales process, the design, and the actual install, they were using the number of, let's say it costs $7,000 to $8,000 for the equipment and the labor. To a certain point, the amount is similar, right? It's, I don't know, Pete, we'll just say $5,000 to $7,000 for that install, for whether it's a heat pump. And then they said, but if you look at the incremental cost of the heat pump install, they were saying, okay, that's probably another $2,000 or $3,000. So they were saying instead of rebating the entire amount of the install for the heat pump, they're like, why not rebate the incremental cost? Because if somebody's going to spend the money on a gas furnace anyway, why are you going to pay them for the gas furnace amount? Because they're going to have to spend it anyway, but why not give them the incremental amount so that you can quadruple your rebates in the marketplace? The group recommended that if you covered that 3/4 of the cost and the incremental extra, quarter cost, you could expand and make that money go further and keep the rebates in the marketplace longer. Pete, did I summarize that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any comments on that? That was their first. And Anne, you're muted.
I just want to make sure that I understood what you said. So in our framework, we frame it up a little bit differently. So I just want to understand, like if we were talking a furnace and a heat pump and the install, right? Are the 3 components, is that right?
The furnace and the heat pump, they install both.
Okay.
The comparison of cost of both.
So the comparison to cost is that is higher than an AC and heat and furnace replacement. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what we're talking about is the incremental difference between them here. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. So that's where they were saying if they had the limited budget, would they get more traction in the marketplace, having the rebate out longer for more months? And also, I don't think the uptake was a problem, but they were looking at having the ending of it end so quickly and contractors not wanting to participate because of that.
Is their design still going to be that the contractor is the one who has to offer an instant rebate and then get reimbursed?
I think that's what we get to recommend. If that's a component of it, then is it still an instant rebate and the contractor has to cover it?
I think that was a big sticking point with a lot of contractors.
Yeah.
Because that was, I mean, putting that much money up is a lot. And I think that was, so if we can reduce that, I think we're reducing the risk with a smaller rebate, number one. Number two, if it was, if we took the contractor completely out of it, obviously that would be great. I think they would love that. I don't know if that's possible, but something to discuss.
So take the contractor out of the carrying costs.
Correct.
The way to put it. Okay. Any comments on that, Jason? That idea?
Basically, that's what we want to tell people. We would forward them what they gave, what basically they were going to give us directly back to them. Let them know that since this is a brand new program, we don't have a lot of trust so far. And basically the ones that we did, the customers were fine doing it that way. So I think that really needs to be changed up to basically kind of like how Xcel does it.
Exactly.
So
I just keep wondering if there's like since Denver is relying on the Xcel Energy requirements, the Xcel Energy rebate form has everything they need. If they do choose to go that direction and do a reimbursement directly to the customer rather than to the trade partner, and they'd have to be willing to, right? It really does change. Like one of the customer advantages to this was an assurity you're going to get that extra rebate, and it was a big rebate, right? So it's asking a lot of Denver to change their model to rely on it qualifying and the customer taking that risk as opposed to the contractor. I'd be surprised if they didn't push back. But in any event, if all the information is already on the Xcel Energy rebate application form, could that go straight to the processors at Denver so that the contractor at least didn't have to double do it?
That would probably be beneficial as well.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It should be tied directly through the Xcel program, to be completely honest, because that's the check and balance that, and that was one of the requirements to be in the Denver rebate program, was to be certified through Xcel, correct?
Yep.
So basically,
my understanding from talking with Denver is that they weren't actually checking any of that criteria. They were relying on Xcel's program to do the verification, and they were merely tacking on. And that was because they did not have resources to check every application. That's why they require the same requirements that Xcel requires.
Makes sense.
So then that actually does make sense, Anne, that it flows directly from their Xcel application and they don't have to duplicate that effort if it's not going to really be checked.
So just carrying that through a little bit more, if we wanted to go down that path, let's say that we're successful at getting the rebate amount lowered, although in this scenario, the benefit of having a lower rebate amount is that the rebates would go further and we wouldn't have that issue of running out of money as fast. Just thinking through like the whole customer experience and keeping in mind, right, the Xcel Energy rebates have now gone up. And SWEEP had announced, and man, I totally missed that part about sales tax is waived for heat pump purchases, which is
that was
awesome.
That was
Oh,
legislation that went through that I don't think our industry understands yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's huge. And then so is the discount. There's another something. What's the other one? There's another part of it.
It's a sales tax and 10% like of the equipment costs is written off your taxes as well.
Got it. So it's a tax break for Colorado state tax.
Yes. I
Okay.
don't know what the
So
break is exactly, but it's something like that.
yeah, but it's a nice one. So it makes perfect sense from a, looking at that incremental cost, right? It makes sense since Xcel Energy has increased the rebate substantially, and then you get those 2 additional bumps to
Mhm.
make the Denver rebate amount lower. Sorry, just thinking like
Yep.
we don't need that great big number to help offset the cost anymore because the incremental cost is going to be really close to covered, if not completely covered. Why give away money that we don't need, that they don't need to give away?
It made a big splash, like giving that big of a rebate created
oh,
buzz.
it's a huge splash.
Yeah, so that was actually probably a good move, and except not the experience of the contractors, but just for the buzz value, the viralness of it. So hopefully it'll have more traction if we change those amounts, or they change those amounts.
There were people all over the West talking about that.
Do we have a data on the participants? Because I would imagine folks might have taken advantage of such a large incentive, even if their equipment wasn't about to die or ready to die, right? If they saw we're going to get almost $10,000, heck, that's great. I'll move forward with this. Versus somebody who's really old, inefficient equipment, and that incremental cost incentive might get them over the hump to actually do a replacement, right? So I think that the demographics of who receives the rebate could change as well. And that's an important factor, right?
So I think that's an excellent recommendation when we say, here's some metrics that we recommend or would love to see that would help us understand what's happening in the market, help them.
Mhm.
So that
Yep.
would be one, like looking at who took advantage of, the rebates. Was it an end of life replacement emergency person at all?
Will
Or
they
was
know
it-
that?
Huh?
That's
Will
true.
they know that?
I don't know. Or will it be like you said, somebody who did an early replacement?
Well, yeah, do they have data on the equipment that was pulled out, right? If they have any sort of model number data, Pete, sounds like probably not.
No,
So
I don't think so, because I think that, I mean, unless that was captured with Excel, I mean, that's the same thing. So
Mm-mm.
they
Yeah.
probably don't have that data.
No, we ask what their former heating and cooling types are,
Yeah,
Mhm.
but that's it.
yeah.
I'm stretching on this one, so just shut me up if I'm off track. What we know from our own data of existing customers, so this is aggregated data, right, of the early adopters of heat pumps who've gotten rebates, is that they are very inclined to be fairly wealthy, right? They have expendable income. They have solar and are therefore, our assumption is that they are inclined to be clean energy mindset, kind of centric. And so from that perspective, I've got to say, I just saw like a email send and the numbers related to that for our 1.6 million customers, and it was a little bitty portion, right? In terms of early adopters, it's pretty small. I would be very surprised if the Denver rebates weren't aligned there. And I guess I want to go back and so just put that into our thinking cap, but then also asking the question, are they doing separate rebates for income qualified customers? Because I know they're really concerned about equity, energy
Yeah.
equity, that kind of thing. Do we know how that's aligned here?
Did have a separate program for lower income.
So they are, when we went and talked to them, we said, on that piece, we said, ask them to tier the rebates. And it was very unclear in their page that, that the AC replacements counted in not having a heat pump only replacing gas. And so we had said, can you add an extra tier specifically calling out AC replacements instead of just the dual fuel system and low income? So we said,
So
like, if you create
I don't
those.
understand that. Sorry. Most existing customers are going to be replacing ACs for heat pumps, right? That is the primary market in existing homes. So I'm not clear what you mean. Sorry.
I think that they said that they were unclear that you could actually replace an AC with a heat pump and get the rebate. They thought
got it.
the way the verbiage was, and it wasn't called out or mentioned anywhere, talking about the forecasting group, said that you need to call that out specifically so that it's clear, because I think they're just going to assume it's going to be a replacement for a furnace as dual fuel that way versus replacement of AC. And then they had said also add the tier for the low income equity piece, because it sounds like the low income is like maybe a separate program and maybe they weren't aware of it. I don't know. So they're just saying put it all together and make it clear that all of that is available for the contractor.
Can I just say that low income piece should be addressed separately. Separately. And the reason is maybe several-fold. What I know about it is that we give funds to Energy Outreach Colorado, and when they do heat pumps for low-income customers, basically the whole cost is covered. So rebates aren't needed there, not for that.
But it wasn't mentioned anywhere on their form. That was my understanding. Like the form, when we looked at it, they're like, okay, we can't tell where to find that. So I think that's where they were saying is like, it needs to be called out that there is a low income program, whether it's a part of the tiers, or that's just how we talked about it. Recommendations, I think we're saying, look, there are 3 different tiers or buckets, right, in the rebates, however that's discussed. And I think the perception was it's just for furnace replacement. And the perception, I think, of the contractors, they're like, why isn't it just calling out an AC replacement only, instead of thinking it had to be for both? So that was one piece. And then the low income bucket, I think, recommendation of, sharing data with Excel and getting feedback on low income, how it fits in, where is it successful, especially with Energy, Outreach Colorado, and all the, there's a couple of those that do that type of work. ICAST does that.
Yeah. Data sharing is a really, 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 really tricky thing.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that would not impact. You could fill out the rebate application for Xcel Energy, and then send the contractor could send a copy to Jeff and the group in Arizona, right, for processing the city of Denver. There's no conflict there. And we can give aggregated information like I was sharing, about the customer type, early adopters, that kind of stuff, aggregated data, no problem.
Yeah.
But for income qualified, in my opinion, they should be talking directly to Energy Outreach, because they are truly the experts about working with that set of customers. I mean, we deal with like the billing side, and do bill assistance and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of customers who aren't they're not lead, they're not identified, they're not in low income programs or income qualified programs, but they could qualify.
Right.
All that stuff's really tricky. Anyway.
And they could be retired and on Social Security too, and a fixed income.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think hopefully they're open to that. I mean, it sounds like they are.
I think do you guys remember when Jeffrey Lee was talking, that they said there was still one part of their program that hadn't closed out their funds? I think it was low income.
Yes, it was.
Installing. Yeah, so that was still in motion, but I think all of us are like, oh, we didn't know that. And how did those contractors become a part of that income qualified sector?
That's the problem. That's why it's still not closed, because they don't know about it.
But it could also be that, as I was alluding to earlier, that the low-income customers can't afford any part of an upgrade or replacement.
Mhm.
And so the uptake for low income isn't going to be there if they have to shell out $2,000 because
Right.
they may not have that money handy. And so it's going to be much harder to get low income participation in some of this type of program under the same rules as a standard customer, because they haven't got access to finances, and contractors are less inclined to potentially work in those areas where they're not sure if they're going to get paid, or the payment is only going to occur after the customer gets a rebate.
Well, don't they, and correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they actually have to pre-qualify for these kinds of programs anyway?
For weatherization, yes, but
And then they would know what they have out of pocket or not out of pocket at that point in time, wouldn't they?
in a weatherization program, usually weatherization, it's all free. But
Okay.
for a rebate program, if it was just rebating them in the standard way, then
Money up front, yeah.
then they would have to call the contractor and say, we want to do this, we think there's a rebate, and not knowing how long the rebate's going to last for, it's going to be an issue. And that leads to the other question on the existing program that's mostly closed, is that were any of those jobs actually instigated by the money put on the table by Denver, or were those jobs in progress that the money appeared and it's like, oh hell, that project we were doing, honey, it's now $10,000 cheaper because Denver's going to give us a check. And they weren't actually sold based on the funds available. They were sold prior to that, and then the funds were made available and used to do that. I mean, there's certainly, you can imagine that happening if you were in the middle of doing that and you're committed to doing it, and then suddenly the money turned up. You'd be like, make sure that happens tomorrow because there's money on the table.
Yeah,
it's a free ridership problem, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's when you have
Magic word.
when you put too much money on, then that certainly can happen to a greater extent, especially when it's short term like that.
I was like, it was a great PR campaign for consumers, but not a great program for moving the market.
Other than a great wake-up call.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good feedback.
Can I throw another one in?
Yeah.
This is not going to be popular, just saying. But gas is not going to go away, right? Our gas service is going to be around. And I'm still struggling with, why are we insisting that people go all electric at this point and give, that Denver won't give any rebates to people who are going to still have furnace as backup? I don't get it. In my opinion, it should be about committing to a certain number of heating hours with electricity.
And I would concur and say that they're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good there.
Mm-hmm.
You make it so stringent, you're not going to get the tipping. You're not going to get the momentum, right?
Yeah.
Like
I think it's because the clean heat plan can't be solved. The issues around the clean heat plan can't be solved if you leave furnaces there. You convert an 80% furnace to a 96% furnace, if you do that, you don't only get a certain amount. If you put people onto a heat pump on top of their existing furnace and have a hybrid system, then you're probably cutting down, it depends how much you're cutting down, but if you're installing a cold climate heat pump on top of that to do the maximum amount of heating, do you need a furnace sitting around under there?
Something.
Well, it also, you can define that by changeover and what you're changing over. So you can define that by temperature. You can, and that in turn, you would be able to understand the reverse math of that and understand, the economics in regards to used fuel.
Yeah.
Right.
It just gets really difficult to get 30% reduction if you don't move some people to full electric.
Well, and some people are going to move there anyway, but what we're really talking about here, and I don't want to belabor it too much, but just, thinking structurally about, let's say that of our year, 3/4 of the year is essentially, or at least 2/3 of it, are heating hours. And if by, as Pete said, right, a switchover temperature, right, setting that, and then looking at the number of hours that are left for some kind of backup, then you've taken the heating hours from this much down to this much, and disqualifying people from moving to heat pumps because you want them to be all electric and get rid of that furnace altogether seems like you're how did you say it, Matt?
Yeah, the perfect being the enemy of the good, and the other piece of that is how many people are you excluding or not going to participate in the program because they don't trust to go all electric. So by allowing for that, drastically reduced natural gas use, you actually can potentially move a lot more people off of heavier users of natural gas.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the hybrid or EV,
Yeah.
Do you get people into an EV, or do you get them into a hybrid gas car? And it's the same kind of problem, but with this, there is requirements to meet certain reductions. Maybe that's a good project for somebody to do, is to do the math and say, okay, if we have a 2-tier program where you get less money for a heat pump that goes on top of a gas furnace and more money for a heat pump, because it's going to have to be a higher performing heat pump that is standalone, how many more people need to be convinced to participate to meet the goals of the clean heat? You're going to need more, because you're leaving some gas running, which means that you need to convert another home or another 2 homes to a hybrid system to get that reduction that you need.
So I feel like that's I'm going to probably shut this one down. You guys are running out of time. But I think this is a great forecasting group metric to talk to RMI about. Like, how could we do that? That would be spectacular, right? If we could go, if you were able to do this much volume, and say you did 2,000, households with the hybrid model, right? How much savings would you get versus getting 50 all electric homes, right?
That's exactly it. And then you start to get to real goals too.
Right. That's the business side, like how we look at it, right? If we're gonna, like, how am I gonna hit my numbers by the end of the year? So we think we should add that to the forecasting request and brainstorm that out with OMI for sure. Anything you want to add on that before I switch us to the next thing? Sorry, do the math. Okay, so we talked about think bigger, 4 times the amount of equipment going in, the tiered, different buckets for adding low income and the AC replacement acknowledgement. I think the big one that we all agree with, that it would probably be another 15-minute conversation, is about don't turn off the funding midstream. One of the suggestions we had is, okay, if it's $3 million a year, put the $9 million in for the first year and see how far it goes and how much you get the market to move. Then you know what your uptake is for funding you going forward in the future. Like, would you get more bang for your buck doing it that way? So if you guys have some other ways to get there, that was the one that we came up with and presented to them.
Patricia, was there any discussion about moving up the supply chain as far as incentive, where the incentive lands, right? Downstream programs have certain advantages, but you move up the supply chain. and then send at a higher level, I think you can potentially have a bigger market impact. And that's something we've seen, right? You have an incentive at a distributor level or even a manufacturer level, and then that trickles all the way down to the end customer. So I think that's to consider.
So we'll add that into that section there under that third recommendation. The other thing that they had said is, and I want to just kind of fact check this with you guys, is that the contractor will likely risk installing 1 or 2 in the beginning of the program, take those and then quit and see what happens and how soon they run out of money, right? With their rebates. Any other, and that was just everybody guessing what was going to happen. So there's good feedback about what really did happen from the contractor's perspective. That's going to be that next meeting, but yeah.
Yeah, I do want to think about in terms of the impact of those recommendations, particularly the ones that have to do directly with contractors, right? The first one being if the rebates are lower and if the rebates go to the customer, right? The customer has to wait for the rebate and not make it required for the contractor to do the upfront piece. And then if the paperwork, if it does go that route, if the paperwork is you fill out one thing and then it's done, you send it to 2 places, right? So that combination of things, thinking about, back to do the math, there were only there were a very limited number of contractors who were willing to do that kind of risk, take that on, or that could afford to. And I was kind of surprised by some of them were smaller companies who went for it. It was pretty impressive. You could see who has a higher risk tolerance. And right? Seriously. So let's say if the risk gets reduced and to the point that it's basically not a risk by the combination of things, well, and then let's put on top of that, less likely to run out of money fast. So what we've done is now create a market condition that is likely to attract a whole lot more contractors to the mix. And that could be really good for everybody.
Should there, if that is the case, should there be a couple of trainings for contractors before the rebate launches too? Like, should that be timed?
Absolutely. And I think we need to, I mean, the bottom line is this whole program will be successful or fail based on what that conversation happens at the kitchen table.
Right.
I mean, that's exactly what's going to happen. So if we get them understanding how to talk about that, then, and give them the words to say, almost, they'll be successful. And most of them already know what the words to say, but some of them don't, and they need that. So the more we give them, the better off they're going to be, and the more successful the program will be. And that's ultimately what we want, right?
Aiming toward the same goal. We're just going
about it. To frame up everything that we've talked about, is it helpful to lead with those suggestions to have the conversation? If we bring in Denver instead of everybody just all over the place, like framing it up, taking what we all talked about here and letting the contractors respond to that, and then add their experiences to it. And they might have some brilliant ideas we haven't thought of, because I always feel like the front line is where the gold is. And then we'll bring Denver in and see if they can bring some metrics with them, some of that they've learned so far, because we think the contractors would like to hear that. And if that's the case, then we'll, do a big push to actually reach out and probably make calls and not just send out email invites to get a good crowd for Denver and to get good feedback.
Oh, I don't think you're going to have trouble getting people to that meeting.
Yeah.
Especially if it's before they open it up. They said they want to survey people, so I don't know if they'll have when they have a survey, but I feel like the informal conversation is more valuable. That anecdotal piece is where I think you hear things that you'll never hear in a survey.
Trying to get contractors to do a survey right now.
Yeah, it's like insane. But I feel like if you can get them, they'll talk while they're doing something.
Sorry.
But yeah, any other things that we should be thinking about in framing that up then? Do we feel like we kind of hit all the highlights?
I think you have.
Okay. Great.
The only thing I thought of was, going back to the hybrid versus full is that you could determine the rebate value based on the essential gas reduction, kind of tailor to different building sizes and the different types of installations. So you're not restricting the installations to just heat pump only, then have ones that are set at different temperatures. So if somebody goes for a cold climate heat pump that's going to work for more of the year, they could receive a larger rebate than those who install an Energy Star heat pump that shuts off at 0.
I got to tell you that sounds really simple, but on a residential basis, at least in the way that Xcel Energy's system is set up, that becomes a custom kind of solution. We're darn close to it, and based on volume, that becomes really
complicated.
hard.
Yeah,
really
I mean, you could use it as tier. I'm not saying necessarily you'd get down to the nth degree, but
I think you could create a situation where you just say, hey, the temperature changeover has to be X. We could figure out what X is.
Yeah, the conservative is 35 or 25 on a non-cold climate heat pump. We insist on a 5-degree for a cold climate heat pump.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Right. Yeah. Cold climate heat pump, no problem.
But cold climate heat pumps go down to the negatives now as well. So
correct.
Yes, but if you get thinking about a rebate sheet that talks about heat pumps, it's already complicated. At some point, like, you have to weigh the value of a few more dollars to the complication of trying to make people figure it out. It's
simplicity.
For sure,
really fast.
If you're trying to encourage further energy efficiency or carbon reduction, then you want to encourage people to switch over their system at the right point. And if that's 5 degrees for a cold climate heat pump, then you're missing out on at least 10, 15 degrees where it could operate successfully and efficiently.
We did an Xcel Energy based rate sheet. I say rate sheet, that's not right, but we did a kind of average customer, different types of heat pumps, different switchover temperatures, and kind of what the outcome was. And it was just like, for those of us who have money, it's a no-brainer. You go to a heat pump.
Right.
It's a no-brainer. Even if you're not going to do a switchover temperature until 35 degrees, that's as high as 35 degrees, $100 more a year.
Oh,
yeah, it's not much. It's not much at all.
Yes, thanks for joining. Super appreciate it.
Same. It was a fun discussion. Thanks for letting me join.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see if we can have some influence on that and help, get that engagement that they're looking for. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.